And so, honestly, I think she does a better job in that video being engaging than I have sometimes because she's funny, she's relatable. Students can be incredibly charming, witty, and great teachers. If you just hand a group of elementary school students a video camera, tell them, I want to learn about something you're an expert in, about this subject or that subject, ask them to make it funny and interesting, maybe give slightly more specific guidelines than that, but not much, because when students explore and they play around, then they can really find great things. In the course of 21st century education reform, there have been a lot of organizations established, from parent unions to teacher unions to even student unions. And I think that it's really unfortunate that oftentimes the voice of the student is the least heard in the education debate because it's one of the most important ones. We're the main stakeholders in education. We have the most to lose and the most to gain, but we don't have a voice. The status quo, one-way teacher-student model is a one-way street to nowhere. It needs to be a two-way street where learning and teaching go both ways. And that is true not just of individual teachers and students in the classroom, but of government and education reform, how that is addressed. In my global health class, a 3-period block signature program launched by my high school just this year, my teachers solicit our feedback on Google Doc with detailed questions after completion of every unit. So we just finished our first unit, which was on HIV/AIDS, and we were asked to provide our feedback on the science portion of the curriculum, on the writing portion of the curriculum, and on our field trips, on the videos that we had watched, on the books that we had read. This is something that I had never seen in any other class previous, where the students were actually asked to provide feedback. They were asked with equal respect, as if we were auditors of our own class, as if we were other teachers in the building. This is how it should be, because we're the ones who go to class and sit in those chairs every day. Students have the insights to have meaningful opinions on school and education reform, beyond just give us vacation days all the time. Maybe you'll hear that from a couple of students when you first ask them, what is the #1 thing you would change about education? But as soon as you start a serious conversation, as soon as you place trust in students to tell you what is on their minds, what they think about school, you'll hear some incredible, very earnest, and maybe even shocking opinions. Student leaders are really changing the discussion around education. If you go on Twitter and you search the hashtag #StudVoice, STU voice, then you'll find a conversation that is uncensored and authentic. And a few years ago, I actually started a group on Facebook called the Student Union, and it was really meant to elicit student opinions on the issues that matter. So, for instance, one of my friends, Irene, asked, what is a teacher? Post your answers in the comments section. My friend Hannah said, a teacher is somebody who is walking on a path, seeking understanding. A student comes along and asks which way to go. The teacher points down the path and they walk together. A lot of people assume the teacher's already at the end of the road, but I like to think the road doesn't end. Nikhil said, they doubted, you believed, I succeeded. And there were a couple other discussion points. I think we started talking about the way that U.S. history is taught, or world history, getting more across the globe interaction, and so there are also conversations going on about science, about technology, pretty much every subject you could think of. Students are weighing in about not only their high school experience or their college experience, but also their middle and elementary school experience, and how that informs the way they live today. In having these conversations, I realized something, that I myself had underestimated what other students could say, because I was blown away when I read some of the things that folks were saying, who were my own age or younger. So the question is, will stakeholders in education do more than listen, but also take action? In asking this question to audiences at educational conferences, I often quote one of my favorite poems, which is Harlem by Langston Hughes. And it reads, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over it like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? I quote it because every day students are walking into classrooms and facing students who have dreams deferred. Taking action is more than ever an urgent moral imperative, because our simmering discontent as students that has existed for a very long time is exacerbated today by the fact that we see how our education can be better. We have more chances than ever to make change outside of our schools, to participate in amazing extracurricular activities like robotics or student R&D or Code Day or TEDx Redmond that make us realize that those kinds of things, that the epic wins, the yes moments we have from those kinds of things are the moments that we deserve to have inside our schools. The contrast between the exciting possibilities in the world outside and the arbitrary information we memorize in the world within, the world of school, has become too great. In the breakout session that follows this presentation, I'll be discussing some ways to give students more access to real-world opportunities for change. But in the present, I want to ask a question. We have the tools at our disposal, waiting and ready to go, so what will the improved schools of the future look like? But let's return to the present for a moment. I want to ask you a question, which is, which one of these images, which you saw a snapshot of for a moment, looks more like the average school to you? A, B, or C? Raise your hand for A. Raise your hand for B. Raise your hand for C. The problem is that C isn't a school. It's an image of a hallway at the prison in Robben Island, South Africa, where Nelson Mandela spent 20 years enslaved. When the schools we go to every day look more like prisons than they look like libraries or cathedrals, we have a problem. And it's not just looks. A prison imprisons people. And a model of school that does not improve, that stays stuck in old ways of doing and thinking, more for producing assembly line workers than presenting students who can think with the breakthroughs they need to and learn from failure, imprisons learning. And treats learning like it's something we can only do 7 hours a day, that we can only do 5 days a week, by listening to one person in one place. And that doesn't make sense because it's not true. We have so many sources of learning now, and the ability to liberate learning from being confined to 4 walls and a blackboard or whiteboard. Creating lifelong learning starts with the realization that our world is the best classroom of all, that teachers can come from all places and be of all ages. They can be people like the tutors I was privileged to have growing up who taught me so much about topics that nobody within regular schools would have realized I might have wanted to know. They can be young people like Cameron Manor who have a camera and internet access. They can be people like Sal Khan, whose CanAcademy.org has over 3,100 teaching videos. When I think of schools that facilitate independent learning and creative thinking, I ask questions. What if instead of prisons, schools were more like libraries, in the sense of opening up unlimited portals to information and knowledge? And more like cathedrals, not in the religious sense, but in inspiring students to look upward and with purpose, and really question, why am I learning this, and have an answer. I remember when I visited Yale, that I was incredibly impressed with the fact that one of their libraries was actually built like a cathedral, and they said it's because we value learning so much. We need spaces that inspire us and don't restrict us. Spaces where we can explore, discover, imagine, and make things. Maybe not literally the pillow forts and makeshift spaceships of childhood, but bigger, better things that require just as much force and creativity, whether starting a conference, or teaching a presentation, or writing a book, or the myriad other things that your students can come up with when given a chance. Don't fight it, don't limit it, don't fear it, don't dilute it, don't ignore it, don't minimize it. The information age is profound. And in the same way that we do not reject or question the change, the effects of the Neolithic agricultural revolution, the Renaissance, or the Enlightenment, we must fully embrace and integrate how profound this is. Realizing the power and potential of harnessing youth digital culture, all those Vines, Snapchats, memes, Reddit, things that maybe some of you have not heard of previous today. Making sure that we use those for educational purposes, seeking students' perspectives on education issues, and ensuring that everything we learn has authentic purpose. These are the actions that we need to take in order to improve the model of school we have currently. And although this talk speaks heavily to technology and the ease of access to information and what this all means for education, I want to say a word about something equally important. The education is not about technology. The education is not about access to technology. It's about learners and educators. It's about that relationship, the playfulness and the exploration. Because in the end, history will show that it was not the technology of today that we needed to achieve human greatness, but rather people to care, to trust, and to make room for creativity and innovation, regardless of whether you have 20 computers in your classroom or none. Many of the attitude shifts and the things about giving students creativity and the chances to explore can be accomplished. Someday down the road, if I actually have that hypothetical conversation with my grandchildren I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, I don't mind if they get a little googly-eyed when I say, no, we didn't have flying cars. But I desperately want them to be amazed and incredulous when I say that when I went to school, everyone was supposed to do an assignment the same way. That if you wanted to do crazy awesome things like organize conferences or start nonprofits, that you had to do them outside of school. And that no, students did not change the world from their classroom chairs. It's strange thinking about education from the perspective of a hypothetical grandmother. You might say it's altruistic of me, but in truth, it's deeply selfish. It's a selfish desire for me in my last year in high school too. You see, I desperately want those hypothetical grandchildren to be amazed, because I want them to know only a world where independent thinking and creative doing are the norm, and not just the exceptions that slip through the cracks in our rigid schoolroom walls.